My name is Rob Simpson and welcome to Directors Uncut. If this is your first episode, we put filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from Chilean surrealism to Italian neo-realism. Then we turn it into a lottery of directors by using a random number generator to pick a name out of the hat. Whatever name comes out, I am joined by a rotating cast of guest hosts to discuss them and their work through 2 films. Today I've been joined by Clinton. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you this, afternoon, evening?
I'm well, thank you.
Excellent. The director that we've got today is a part 2. We did Takeshi Kitano, which I constantly kept on saying wrong. I mean, he came onto the scene as Pete Takeshi, and I kept on calling him Pete Kitano, so I'm just owning that mistake right now. I know I did it. So I guess the immediate question is, where did you first hear about Takeshi Kitano? Your first movie you seen, even?
Well, the first movie I actually saw by him was Zatoichi.
Okay.
And I still am, a huge fan of the Zatoichi series with Shintaro Katsu. So I was curious about this new film, and that ended up being my introduction to Takeshi Kitano. Oh, the DVD I had of Zatoichi also came with a copy of Sonatine.
Very good.
So I watched Zatoichi and said, yeah, it's decent. And I watched Sonatine and I was like, okay, this is a director that I need to absorb more of his work.
So last week we did 2 pretty major films from him, Hana-Bi and Kikujiro. So I think they're pretty much 2 outliers. The sort of film that he's known for in Hana-Bi, in this crime movie, and Kikujiro, which is this kind of playful, but it's got a bit of a dark underbelly to it too. Comedy. This week, again, I guess it's 2 pretty extreme ends of his filmography. We've got his first film, Violent Cop, 1989, I think it was.
Yes.
And Zatoichi from 2003, so 2 pretty wild extremes from the guy. Without getting into his sort of post-Zatoichi phase, of those 2, Violent Cop and Zatoichi, which one would you like to talk about first?
Well, I think Violent Cop is the best place to start. It's his debut film.
Weirdly historic one, too, as far as how it came into the world. Violent Cop stars Takeshi Kitano as the titular cop called Azuma, who is a problematic fellow. He's a good cop, but he basically beats up everybody. I mean, in the first scene, as far as a filmmaker sort of announcing their arrival into the world, I think the first scene is a homeless guy being beaten up by a gang of teenagers.
Yeah.
And from that, we introduced into his style of policing, where he follows one of the gang into his house and beats him up quite badly in his bedroom. And from there, we go through a series of episodes, which includes a increasingly escalating face-off with a gang of I don't know, they are a Yakuza, but the kind of low-level Yakuza that he's picking a fight with.
Yes, I mean, they are Yakuza, but they're more thugs than anything.
Yeah, that was my confusion, because, I mean, there's just to explain the sort of system of Yakuza, there's patriarchs who are heads of smaller families within like branch families, and there's head families.
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very complicated. And I'm basing my entire knowledge off the Yakuza video game.
Yeah, it is complex.
So
There's other directors that dive
Oh, yeah.
more into the structure of it.
Yeah.
This we're just kind of thrown into it and
Yeah.
expected to know a little bit about.
That little subfamily feels like a branch family, sort of like a wild dog that just set out to do odd jobs. And naturally, they come face to face with Kitano, and it gets quite bleak. I'll be honest.
Yes, it does.
What are your feelings on this one?
Well, it's a very bleak film.
Hmm.
It's very simple. It's a very simple plot.
Yes.
Of just escalation. And he's definitely kind of this Dirty Harry-ish archetype. And I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's got some pacing issues, I would say.
Okay.
But all in all, it's a fantastic film, and the finale of it is just jaw-dropping, and it's just madness almost.
It's quite a shock to the system, really. I mean, it's called Violent Cop, but I don't think that really prepares you for how violent it is. There's certain kung fu movie people who have a type of contact in the way they do their fights. It's not full contact, but they have contact just so it gives it a believability.
Yes.
In this, Kitano, he fully on hits people. Like, really, really goes to town on them. There's multiple scenes where he just slaps somebody over and over and over and over again, which is hard to watch.
Yeah, it's difficult. There's tough to stomach bits in it.
Yeah.
A lot of the violence, which is interesting because towards the beginning of the film, there's almost this darkly comic thread that goes through it, and that just eventually starts to unravel, and the violence becomes more and more dominant in the film, and it's just yes, he's very violent.
The kid at the beginning, he just kicks around properly, not acting style of screen violence. He kicks this kid around. There's a scene later on with we happily spoil it by all means if you feel like later.
Okay,
it's a decently old film, so if you're not seeing it, I don't think you go to. You can't really talk around spoilers sometimes. And there's a scene with I guess it's a drug courier, drug runner that he just slaps over and over and over again, and you can see that the look on the actor's face. He is hating Takeshi Kitano at this point in time.
Yeah, that's the scene in the bathroom, right?
Yeah, where he's ugly.
Yeah, it's very ugly.
But it's his directing style, I guess. At least in this.
Yeah. In this,
it's authentic, I guess, in a word.
I wonder if some of it just comes from the fact that he did a lot of comedy in Japan, and he was just trying his hand at kind of the opposite end of that, and came out with this very tough to watch film with the kind of violence in it is just the camera never really pulls away. You just see him slap and slap and slap guys, and it's it plays with that kind of voyeuristic, can't turn away from a car crash kind of.
Yeah, rubbernecking.
Yeah, rubbernecking.
It's kind of weird in the way it's put together tonally as well, because you mentioned comedic there, and the score in it, check that it is Joe Hisaishi, because it always was. No, by Daisuke Kume, who I don't know any of his work, but his score, it's quite much, it's what you'd expect from a comedy. It's quite bouncy, it's quite jovial, it's quite light-hearted.
I found it, it's when it's actually used.
Yes,
it's very. It just doesn't seem to fit with the tone of the film, which is interesting.
No, he hasn't done much. Kume, he's done Yakinuki Dragon from 2018, and the anime, a very anime-looking anime, from 2004 called Moon Phase.
Not familiar with it.
So, it's an interesting movie. It's historically interesting as well, because it started off, if I can remember history correctly, it was supposed to be a Kinji Fukasaku movie, but he backed out of it. And
that makes a lot of sense.
Through, because it became like a big deal when they're reunited on Battle Royale. But in this instance, he effectively rewrote through help of people he was collaborating with, rewrote the entire script, and invented a few sort of little tricks of his own. Like there's a shot, a nothing shot. It shows his inexperience, but his willingness to sort of have a go and experiment. There's a shot where he's just walking over the bridge, and the camera, usually in that sort of scene, it'd show his head, it'd show his full body, that'd be, presented in a normal-looking way.
Mm-hmm.
But that shot, it's cut off his feet and it's cut off his head. So it's quite a unique-looking film. Did you notice that one?
I didn't. I noticed he's kind of got a thing for long shots of people walking.
Yes, he does.
So that's kind of what I noticed rather than the actual framing of the shot.
Yeah. Well, they are all part of the same conversation, really. But yeah, it's an interesting film full of, well, for many reasons. I mean, there's actors in there who will become consistent throughout his career. I don't know the name, but the head of the gang is a reliable actor. He's also in Zatoichi as well.
Yes.
And there's also a low-level member of the gang who involved with the plot of his sister. Who he's another familiar actor. I think he was in Boiling Point or Sonatine, and he's also the guy in Ichi the Killer who had all the hooks in his back.
Yeah.
If that means anything to anybody.
Yeah, well, I'm sure anybody watching for Takeshi Kitano is probably going to be familiar with Miki. So,
well, yeah, you'd hope so. But I like that about directors when they have sort of a consistent cast throughout.
Yeah, it's nice to see the same faces in different roles.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the name of the person who it was now, because it's such a small role, but it's one of those faces that it's really interesting coming back to the origin of his career when you've seen everywhere he goes and the things that he does, his little trip to America with Brother, and you see where it all began, and it's. Yeah, what's he called? It's just absolutely...
I'm going to apologize ahead of time that I'm terrible with names.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's fine. I mean, I've got IMDb open and I'm just clicking each one until I recognise the face. And it's not going to happen because I'm going to have to string it along for ages. Okay, so instead, I kind of want to talk about the ending.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's mood-wise, it does expose quite a lot of what he does. Because his movies aren't entirely sexual, I don't think. There's there's a flashing scene in one of his in Sonatine, I think, but beyond that, it's
I don't get that from his films.
Yeah,
besides the odd bit out.
Besides a bit in this, I'd say.
Well, yes,
a pretty gratuitous bit of rape in this.
Yeah, I understand why it's in the film. It's part of this escalation. But it kind of ground the film to a halt for me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Especially considering they were also forcing, I assume it was heroin on her.
Yeah. She's after medicine, they keep on referring it as. Please give me the medicine, I think she says.
Yeah. Well, she says dope. In the translation I have.
Oh, and the British BFI subtitles called it medicine, so that's a bit of a wild variation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was she kept on saying, "Where's the dope? Where's the dope?"
Well, that changes the tone of that scene quite a lot.
Yeah,
it's just one of those things, isn't it? I mean, the choice of words, because Japanese is a weird language. It just, if you translate it literally, it's literally nonsense.
Yeah, it's...
So the tone of how they interpret that changes the scene, because when she says how please give me the medicine, it kind of suggests that she's quite naive, quite innocent.
Yeah, and she's also, when we first meet her, she's in the hospital. We're led to believe it's the behavioral health issues she has. So, saying medicine may be a bit of a callback to that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the American one, they just full out go say dope, which makes her desperation later on as she's searching the pockets even more, heartbreaking, really.
Oh, yeah, it's tragic. It's a tragic end. It's an interesting ending. You really like the ending, you said, and the way it unfolds.
Yeah, it's...
I mean, spoil it by all means. I mean, it fits off in a warehouse.
I mean, it's so violent and shocking.
Yes.
And part of what I really like about the ending is when Azuma is coming out of the building, gets shot by the other thug.
Yes.
The one guy sums it up perfectly. At least in the American subtitles, he says, "Jesus, has everybody gone crazy?"
I think he said in the British subtitles, they're all monsters, which it's similar.
Yeah. And I mean, I had to scrape my jaw off the floor, because not only does he, again with the spoilers, not only does he kill the hitman, he ends up shooting his own sister.
That I'm not sure about, I'll be honest. That is a decision, I guess. I can understand the reasoning, but it's so cynical.
Yeah, it's extremely cynical.
Yeah, so I think it kind of jumps the shark, I think, a little bit with that one choice. It's such a great film until he does that, and a little bit... I think it passed as okay in 1989, but in 2022, it's a little... Was that the right decision, maybe?
Yeah, I was just so swept up in the whole ferocity of it all that I honestly didn't stop to think if that was the right decision. It just felt like that's the way it was going. Because again, she's searching the pockets going, "Oh, dope, I need dope." And at this point, Azuma's just kind of had it with everything. And I guess he just kind of, switches flipped in him or something that just almost feels like it's a mercy killing, as I realize how...
Yeah, I guess.
How horrible that sounds and callous that sounds, but I don't know. I guess I was just trying to justify it in my own brain.
Yeah, it's another thing. I mean, justifying it in your own brain. We speak in the West that we have a pretty decent drug rehabilitation, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
We've got stuff going on, but maybe Japan in the 80s, being a drug addict was as good as a death sentence, maybe. So there's like the untold sides of this.
It's possible. I mean, it hasn't... It's always been a stigma.
Yes.
And it's only been recently over here that the push has really been made to kind of make it accessible to everyone. So I don't know. That could have been the same thing in Japan. I don't know enough.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're right, and it was not the best choice to make.
It's just context changes these things, and it's just a little bit, whoa, that's a bit extreme. So if you have like the social and historical context, I think it maybe makes more sense as a decision. Maybe, I don't know. But you mentioned earlier about the pacing issues.
Yeah, I felt there were a lot of. I shouldn't say a lot. There were some scenes, a lot of the walking scenes, I felt just kind of felt a little padding, like a little padding.
Yeah, there is quite a few. Like, just for example, there's a scene where Azuma goes to visit, I don't know what that person is, but he's in this shack in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, yes.
Has a chat with him. He asks him to rat out whoever's this hitman, this killer that's wandering around this part of Japan. He says, "No, I'm not doing that. That's a death sentence." So he walks off. We follow the camera follows him as he walks off, and when he's going over a bridge, he sees somebody at the corner of his eye. We know it's the killer, but we continue following him. Then all of a sudden he stops, and then he starts running back, and it's about a 5-minute bit.
Yeah, and then that's what I mean. It could have been cut down a little bit, but I kind of want to say I'm not a filmmaker,
Oh no. You can
so
be open with these things. You don't have to like it if you can't do it. It's
the
fine.
choices he made, obviously he made with a purpose, and I think you see it, that slow pacing, I think paid off a little better in a film like Sonatine.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I mean, you say you're not a filmmaker. At this point in his career, neither was he.
Well,
He was a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And reading the book that came away with the BFI set of this, Sonatine and Boiling Point, was it? Yeah, I think it was Boiling Point. This is a phase in Japanese history, in Japanese cinema, where they were basically inviting anybody from other careers to have a go at filmmaking. I mean, I've not got any examples of that off the top of my head, but I think there's a musician that they gave that opportunity to as well. So it's a dire straits era of Japanese filmmaking, which just so happened to find this diamond in the rough.
Unfortunately, my set did not come with a booklet or much in the way of special features.
Well, there's no special features. I think there's a slight interview, an archival interview, but
So I was just kind of thrown into this world, not entirely understanding everything.
Okay.
Well, I get a lot of it from watching a lot of Fukusaku.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there is a feeling, especially of the here we go. There's so many names for it. Yakuza Papers, the what they're called,
Battles Without Honor and Humanity.
Yeah, it has a feeling of that series, I think, especially Violent Cop.
Yes.
What's the one called? It's some battle in some part of Tokyo. I can't remember the name of the movie. It's got...
from the Yakuza Papers?
Yes.
Death Fight in Hiroshima.
That's the one, yes. This feels very much from the same cloth as that one, especially, I think. Also, if you haven't seen those movies, please do watch those movies, because they are very, very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Just get a spreadsheet out.
Because that one, there's new Battles of Honor and Humanity. There's just so many.
Yeah, there's 5 of them and deals with a lot, but that's another day, another story.
Oh, of course. So, closing thoughts on Violent Cop. Anything you want to bring up? Spent on the cop.
I think, I mean, it's one heck of a debut from Kitano.
Yes.
A very good film, very tough to watch, and shows that he's really a man of many talents, not just a comedian.
Yeah, he certainly isn't. Apparently, I have not read his autobiography because I don't think it's been translated into English. But from somebody who's read it on Letterboxd, I'll credit him officially. So it's Tao A, if you don't follow him. He's a good follow. He's a big Kitano fan. But he's saying in one of his reviews how basically the Yakuza keeps on inviting him to dinner because they like him so much, which I think is just an interesting wrinkle to his career.
Missed managed. Knox.
Potter, what are you doing wandering the corridors at night?
I was sleepwalking.
How extraordinarily like your father you are, Potter. He too was exceedingly arrogant, strutting about the castle.
My dad didn't strut, and nor do I. Now, if you don't mind, I would appreciate it if you could lower your wand.
This is the part of the show where typically I'd play in a clip from a previous episode where we pick who's coming up next. But with this being a part 2, we've already picked who is coming up next. That is Alfonso Cuarón. So in this little window, I'm just going to throw out a few mentions for some stuff. Well, first of all, if you've not subscribed, please do. It helps the podcast immeasurably. And I'd be very, very appreciative of it. Words. Hard. Also on Spotify as well, if you've listened to half an hour, you can give us a rating, so please do. I mean, that is the place where the show is listened to the most, so if you're one of those people who listen, please just do give us a star rating. It'd mean the world to me, genuinely. Some podcast stuff, please do check out Pop Screen. I've featured on that quite a lot. I've got an upcoming appearance talking about a 2022 horror film. I'm saying that vaguely because I don't know whether Graham's announced that yet, but please do check out Pop Screen. I've been on it loads of times. Fun podcast talking about movies and especially pop stars' involvement in them. So that's the sort of the framing device for it. And just some other things. I've also had a few guest spots that I don't think I've mentioned on the podcast. I was on Road to Nowhere. Andy, who's been on this show quite a bit, it's his podcast. I did a Direct to Nowhere in which I talked about Takeshi Miike. Also, an upcoming appearance on Bell's podcast, Fishnets and Philosophy. Just full disclosure, that's an awesome name for a podcast, so keep an eye out for that too. Also, some other stuff that's going on. I did a YouTube video for this first season of this podcast in which I picked the best 5, I should say, movies that I watch. And that's the best 5 according to me, because if it was the best 5 just generically, I'd have to put 8.5 at the top. And honestly, horses for courses. Let's just say horses for courses. Also the website as well, thegeekshow.co.uk, in which I am editor and this podcast is affiliated. Check out all sorts of things going on over there. Recently we had an opinion piece on why Better Call Saul was overrated. Don't know, never seen it. Don't really have a horse in that race. As well as reviews from, I should say, When the Screaming Starts, A Fugitive from the Past, The Guest, I did that one. And The Last Thing Mary Saw and Love, Hungarian word, Cesarellum. I've also got a review upcoming for Police Story 3 Super Cop, so look out for all those things. And that's probably out of date by the time this episode goes live, because it's a very, very active website. There's all sorts of things going on over there. So that leads us neatly into the second movie of the night, which is 2003's Zatoichi.
よくですね。よくなんすか。
おい。サイクルの音変わったな。
何手がんだいとむけら。
I do have the original Zatoichi set all lined up, all the many, 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 many movies, which is intimidating me, and I've never got around to watching them. So I'll have to lean on you a little bit with the reference.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
The mid-series, but
I have the Criterion set of them. I used to have the, I forget the company that put them out, the DVDs, I had them all.
Yeah.
But as soon as that Criterion set came out, I snagged that up because I love Zatoichi.
There's at least 20 of them, isn't there?
There's 26 films.
Wow.
And a TV series that runs 111 episodes. And they all feature Shintaro Katsu as Zatoichi.
So before we get into Zatoichi, I've got to ask this because it's just sort of been burrowing. I mean, what sort of burrowing like a hole in my head? Because it's a series I want to watch, but I've never known where it lands. Is it more sort of classical, people are being hit by swords and they fall over, sort of the Samurai trilogy and the Inagaki series? I don't know if you've seen that. Or is it more Lone Wolf and Cub?
Well, it changes. It starts out that way. And then you get directors, I believe Misumi, who directed the Lone Wolf and Cub films.
Mm.
You get him directing some of the Zatoichi films, and they become a little more violent and gratuitous.
Yeah.
But as it starts out, it's a very classical feeling, and it sort of morphs into, what you would know Zatoichi is now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been recommended that like a priority watch is Zatoichi versus the One-Armed Swordsman.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Okay.
That's with Jimmy Wang Yu.
Yeah. Is it watch it chronologically, so start at number 1?
I don't. You can jump around. They're really self-contained stories.
Well,
the only ones that are really necessary to watch back to back are the first one, A Tale of Zatoichi, and the second one, A New Tale of Zatoichi. They complete one story.
Okay.
The rest are like one-shots.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'll watch that. It's a project for myself, I guess.
Mm.
But I don't know when the last Zatoichi was, but it would have been a while between that and Takeshi Kitano picking it up again in 2003.
The last one was 1989, which was Zatoichi, Darkness is His Ally. And there was it followed the TV show.
Okay.
So there was a huge jump in time between the last Zatoichi film, then the TV series, and then the actual last film, which was Darkness is His Ally.
Okay. So this is, I guess, a completely fresh break. Like a new invention of the character with Takeshi Kitano playing him with peroxide blonde hair.
That was an interesting choice.
As he's not so much elderly, but an aging samurai acting as a masseuse, walking from town to town. And
he's actually Yakuza. He's not a samurai. He's
well, yes. Oh, well, I assume I'm going off your knowledge, or that.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No. I mean, I know nothing about Zatoichi beyond this movie.
Yeah, so. It doesn't really explain that in this film. He just kind of dropped in to his, guy. Which is how all the Zatoichi movies start. Is him wandering into some kind of town or mess.
It's the sort of the nameless stranger Western archetype, isn't it? Really?
Yes, very much so.
And he turns up at a town which is, it's having its problems, but don't they always?
Oh, absolutely.
So we have a war between gangs, a gang that wants to get rid of every other gang and sort of have dominance.
Mm-hmm.
One of the little gangs is forcing people to pay protection money daily. That gang is sort of swept aside by this. The main gang who hires Tadanabo Asano, who plays Hattori Hattori, to basically be their bodyguard and kill everybody. And Kitano, Zatoichi, walks into town and, well, he just solves the issues, really. He doesn't really try to get involved, just sort of involve himself in him.
It's typical of a Zatoichi film.
So there's two questions, really. I mean, it escalates, isn't it? And it escalates, really, into a big face-off with a style of action which I think we need to talk about, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I think we might be.
Yeah. So generally, though, what are your feelings on this one, both as a standalone and as a Zatoichi movie?
Well, I think it's fine. It's a fine Zatoichi film. Takeshi Kitano does his best to emulate Shintaro Katsu's tics as the character, and the tropes are there, and it's a fine film. I wasn't kind of blown out of my socks by it, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's enjoyable.
It's a fun, it's a fun way to spend 2 hours if you like the character. Even if you want an introduction to the character, you could do worse.
Tonally, though, it's kind of unique. It's essentially a comedy.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Because I don't know if it, again, relates to his other movies, but he's a bit of a ringer when it comes to the traditional gambling game, Hana-Cho. There's a step-nephew, I guess, of a woman who helps him into the town, who's a bit incorrigible. We have two daughters of the Naruto family, which is a weird thing to say. One of them is a daughter, and the other one is a guy posing as a daughter, who are geisha, essentially. There's a little bar, basically, which is, there's more there than meets the eye. It's just, it's all very light-hearted.
Yes, that's very typical of the series as it went along.
Okay.
The Zatoichi character himself is almost, comedic.
Mm.
But when needs to throw down,
Yeah, I mean,
he can.
It's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, if this was an American or a UK or European or what have you, they just have an actor who isn't particularly skilled with a sword, but could shoot it in such a way that it sort of masks the gaps. I mean, a classic example, it's not a martial arts movie anyway, but Taken and infamous 14 cuts to jump over a fence thing. Whereas in Japan, I can't remember the name of the Lone Wolf and Cub guy because he's a very complicated name he's got.
Yeah,
But he's the brother of Shintaro Kato, actually.
Yes, it's his brother.
But not being able to speak for Zatoichi, but the Lone Wolf and Cub, he's a very, very skilled swordsman. I'm assuming Katsu was too. A screen swordsman, I should say.
Yeah.
Kitano isn't quite the same, is he?
No, he's not.
And the action's not great, let's be honest.
No, it's not. And I really had issue with the extremely poor CGI.
Oh, yeah.
There's no weight to it. There's no realism to it. It's very poorly done, and it really knocks the fights down quite a few pegs for me.
Yeah, I mean, this era of Japanese samurai movies, they're all done with sort of CG blood, which it's not great, but you can get used to it, I guess. But it's the contact as well. There's certain shots. I think there's a bit where he sort of runs the sword up somebody's arm, and it's just, like you say, there's no sense of weight, there's no sense of, he's literally just cut a person's arm in half and sliced all the way up and made two floppy bits. It just doesn't give that impression, really. It feels like play fighting.
Yeah, it really does. I kind of had a feeling we were going to be in agreement on this when you mentioned it earlier. It doesn't have that same impact of the violence as it did in Violent Cop.
No.
Where you can just feel the violence. In this, it really is like play fighting. The fight in the gambling hall.
Yes.
And that's the one where he cuts the guy's arm off as he's going to throw the dice.
Yeah.
Which was interesting because that was a bit of almost uninitiated aggression from him, which isn't really in tone with the character that I've come to know. So that whole scene was a little odd to me.
Yeah. It kicks off with him saying, I think it's, those dice don't sound the same as the other dice.
Yeah.
And then he just kills them all.
Yeah, he does. I think part of it is he's aware who the gangsters are, and he's set out to clean up town in a way.
Yeah.
But it felt a little, there's something about it felt a little off to me. I can't really articulate exactly what, but I think it was just that sudden aggression that felt a little off for the character. But again, I come from the background of Katsu's Zatoichi, so unfortunately, I'm always going to be judging against that.
Well, it's not just that either. Just taking it in isolation, it's not the sort of thing that a hero or a nice guy or an admirable person with heroic qualities would do. He's the instigator.
Yeah, exactly.
He just kills all of these people sort of nonchalantly because they cheated him in a game of sort of dice games.
Yeah.
But I think it's better as a character piece, honestly. It's full of quirk and charm in a way which I don't think he really did anywhere else in his career, besides his bleakest era with things like Getting Any. But it's charming, nonetheless. I think.
It is. The characters are wonderful in it. They're each unique, and I should say the good guys, the characters he surrounds himself with. There's a bunch of really kind of funny scenes where initially he helps a woman to her house with a basket of vegetables.
Yes.
And she says, well, why don't you stay here for the night? And he kind of smiles, and she says, don't get any ideas. And then later, there's a scene in the way it's framed. You can't quite see what's going on. and you just hear her kind of making pleasurable sounds and him moving. And
Yes.
as the camera comes down, you can see he's massaging her. And it's just it's quirky and fun like that.
Yeah. It's also got kind of a musical, well, it's definitely got a musical edge to it. There's a bit at the beginning where there's some people in the rice fields, and the way they hit the ground, it's very much
Yes.
in rhythm, like a musical number. And of course, I think the thing this is most famous for, it's not being a Zatoichi movie, it's the fact that it ends with a full-blown dance number.
Yeah, the festival.
Which I don't think I've ever seen any martial arts film, like Chinese martial arts film. The closest you get to that is a sort of a dragon dance scene.
Yeah, I think, that's the best comparison I could come up with, would be the dragon dance.
I mean, there's some great, I think, what was it? Dreadnought is
Dreadnought,
brilliant in
yes.
that, yeah.
Dreadnought's absolutely brilliant.
In this, it's a fun ending. It's kind of, it sells what this movie is as an idea. It's not a martial arts movie. It's not really a Zatoichi movie. It's just maybe Kitano playing around with them, having a go, seeing what he can do. It's different.
I agree with that. That's fun because you see the whole cast of characters at the end dancing. You even see the two geisha as children, and then they kind of morph them to adults as they're all dancing.
If you're not seeing it, I don't know how to describe it. It's effectively like historical Japanese tap dancing.
Yeah, they're wearing those wooden shoes, and all I could think of was stomp.
Yes, it's very stomp with wooden swords and a nice feudal history dress, which is a niche maybe if ever they want to break out into something else. There we go. But
it made me smile.
Oh yeah, it's fun. But any closing thoughts on Zatoichi? This Zatoichi. To be specific.
Hold on while I get my essay out. No,
but there's also another one as well. I mean, I think it's better than the other one. Just to preempt you, there was a female-fronted one, which I think they called Ichi, which wasn't great. I think this is better than that at the very least. But
yeah, it's a fun film. Like I said, it's a fine Zatoichi story. It's almost a better Kitano film than it is a Zatoichi story.
Entirely.
And it's fun. And it's a nice introduction to the character. It plays out in a way like a greatest hits.
Okay, that makes sense.
But in his own style.
I mean, there's nothing that I can really say that's against that. I mean, it's fun, but it's probably not the place to start with Kitano. Honestly, I'd say
no. I wouldn't. I wouldn't start there. Frankly, I don't even know where to suggest somebody start with Kitano.
Because you could say Hana-Bi, but that's really, really heartbreaking and bleak, and you don't want to start there. You could say Kikujiro, but it's sort of very different to what he usually does. I guess maybe Sonatine's probably the best.
I think Sonatine's a solid choice. And, it's my favorite film by him, so bias is there. But
Not seen it for a while, but yeah.
It's a wonderful film and really showcases all of his talents kind of in one.
So that's kind of a nice segue there. So usually at this point in part one of these episodes, I ask people's feelings on the director, but I can't repeat that. That's too derivative. So in part two, I traditionally ask, which I think is very appropriate because I think it's fair to say he's retired now. He's not done anything for a few years. He's 75 years old.
Yeah.
So I think he's done. So what do you think his legacy is as a filmmaker? Be it big or small, but just your personal take on it. It's a big question, I know. It doesn't have to have grand answers or film theory answers. Just,
I know.
On a personal level,
I'm kind of bad with questions like this, to be honest with you. His impact is really just, trying a lot of different things, playing in different genres, quirky characters, oftentimes very rough violence.
Yes.
Although it depends on, something like Sonatine is different violence-wise than something like Violent Cop.
Yeah.
But
what I'd add to that is essentially he will always be a very important Japanese filmmaker because he allowed a generation of people to discover Japanese cinema. He came in at a pretty bleak era because Japanese cinema in the 1990s, outside of J-horror, wasn't really anything to write home about.
I guess it depends on who you're watching or who you're talking to, because Miike did play
Oh yeah, but it's like scales, isn't it?
a big part in that. But he was also not quite as how would you say
He's not as accessible,
mainstream accessible. Yeah, exactly.
And I think
that's what I was looking for. Whereas
I think Kitano won the Palme d'Or for Hana-Bi, so he really got international recognition on Japan. I think Ring is also, he got international recognition, but I think it wasn't for a few years, really. It wasn't until about 2001 so was it 99? Either or, but this got to the eyes of Japanese cinema in a way which was very, very important for Japanese cinema in a down period. He got a lot of eyes and a lot of attention on it. I think Miike was maybe a bit late, sort of 97. He really started kicking around. Getting any sort of notoriety with I think it's V Cinema scene he was part of, which is, just to explain that, it's direct to video, but it means it's a little bit more, less of a bad thing. If you say straight to DVD in the UK, at least, it's kind of a dirty thing of really bad movies are just sort of thrown on DVD and forgotten about. But I'm not sure if it's the same in America. But
yeah, in general, direct to video is like a death knell for a film. It's not always the case, but it, especially during the 80s and 90s, direct to video, kind of, you'd scoff at it and say, it's just some weird, cheaply made.
Yeah. But this V Cinema was that, but it was also very, very inventive.
Yeah, very creative.
But yeah, Miike sort of Kitano cut through all of that and got internationalized on Japan, and only that elevates him to sort of a level of sort of the all-time greats, really. Not many people have had that sort of international cut through, like your Kurosawas and what have you.
I never thought of it that way. I've just been a fan of Japanese cinema for so long. I never looked at it that way. That's very true.
Le ciné Saloum, la meilleure des planques pour des mercenaires en cavale.
3 jours ici et tout le monde nous aura oubliés. On se connaît.
Now we're at the part of the show where we talk about other things that we've been watching. TV, movies, even podcasts that you've been enjoying recently. It's completely open field to talk about whatever you want. So, is there anything in particular that you'd like to talk about?
I watched an absolutely fantastic Norwegian film called The Innocents.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Which unfortunately is not available in the UK streaming or via Blu-ray. In the States, it's on Shudder and has a Blu-ray coming out soon. And it is a movie about young children in an apartment complex who have blooming psychic kind of telekinetic powers.
Yes.
And it's just how they use it and what happens. And of course, things unravel, and it's very unnerving and very chilling. And I can't recommend it more. If you can find a way to watch it, please do. Yes. It's an excellent film.
I've talked to people about it before, and they said there's certain bits, like hardened horror fans, and certain bits where even they have to look away.
Yeah, there's 2 scenes, and I'm not going to give anything away. Not for this. It's a brand new film.
Yes.
That are difficult to watch. Very difficult to watch.
See, that's such a loaded statement because I know that Norwegian and Scandinavian stuff have such a dark sense of humour. So it's just in the case of this movie, how far did they take it? How dark did they go for the innocents? And I think that curiosity's got me.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a selling point for some out there, really.
Oh, yeah.
The
It's
curiosity. Again, with the morbid curiosity is going to drive him. But I haven't been watching a whole lot, to be honest with you. I watched that on a recommendation from a friend in the UK. Absolutely loved it. I don't really watch TV. Long form series just kind of lose me.
Yes, agreed mostly. But there's some things that cut through occasionally.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, there is.
One of them, which you've set me up quite nicely for, in the upcoming episode, which I've already recorded, the timeline of this podcast is all over the place. There were recommendations thrown out for a lot of the Korean supernatural horror stuff that's on Netflix series.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I've been watching Sweet Home, which is a title which is there's a Japanese one. Where I think it was Kiyoshi Kurosawa did that. There's a Hong Kong one which is notoriously violent. I've heard from its reputation. Very, very.
Oh, you mean
delicious.
Dream Home?
Dream Home. That's it. Yes. Funny how I got that mixed up. Which has got a reputation for being super grim.
Yeah, it is. It's very darkly comedic, though.
But Sweet Home, it's based on a Korean webtoon novel, manga, manhwa, in which one day in Korea, suddenly, out of the blue, there's a curse that turns people's into monsters, basically. It works using your desire and corrupts you and turns you into monsters, and a really inventive monster design as well. Like one guy in one episode, it's just a man stood on the floor, but he's got a really, really long neck which goes up about 10 floors, and on the top of that neck is a giant eyeball. And if you decapitate it or cut bits off it, it'll stay alive. So you can't kill these monsters. People turn into... There's a spider monster in there. One of the characters turns into a giant fur ball. One of the people sort of flirts with being a monster, but it just makes them regenerate really well. So it's a end of the world scenario, and I'll be honest, as far as end of the world dramas go, I'm done. I tried Walking Dead, it burnt me out on pretty much all TV. I just done after that. So this has the similar sort of issues as far as when people are trapped and they're all panicking, it kind of runs into a wall sometimes, those sort of stories. But the invention of the monsters, the invention of the concept, it's just got me really interested, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I've heard very good things about it. And it's on my queue on Netflix should I ever get to it, but I do tend to push aside series in favor of films.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. It's just such a big time sponge, but I thought, there's lots of interesting Korean stuff, so I may as well give it a go. I've got Netflix.
Yeah,
may as well try it. I'll be trying
out there.
Kingdom after this. But
I tried Kingdom. I can't with the zombie apocalyptic series. I just, I grew up almost strictly a horror fan.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many zombie films that I'm so oversaturated with it that I can't enjoy. I mean, Kingdom has some wonderful sets, wonderful period costumes and everything, but unfortunately, it just didn't work for me. But that's me.
Yeah. Horses for courses, as the English saying goes.
Yeah.
Anything else you've been watching? Movies, especially?
No, other than my usual kung fu fare.
Anything in particular? Always happy to talk about kung fu movies.
The last one I watched was Shaw's brother film called The Bells of Death.
That's a very
That
rare
was a
one.
lot of fun. It's just a sword fighting, wushu style film.
Okay.
tougher to find, but
Yes.
I consider it one of the kind of diamonds in the rough of the Shaw's Brother catalog.
It's one of the earlier ones as well, I think.
Yeah,
Mid-60s.
it is, to tell you exactly, 1968.
Yes, it's very early then. Pre-Gordon Liu and the Five Venoms and what have you.
Yeah, it's right alongside the earlier Chang-Chi films like The One-Armed Swordsman and Return of the One-Armed Swordsman.
Okay.
Besides that, I've been on a bit of a kick watching Walter Hill films.
Okay.
And recently I watched an old film by him, 1981, Southern Comfort, about a group of National Guardsmen doing drills in the bayou. And of course, they get in some trouble with the locals and things go bad very quickly.
Okay. This last thing then, I'll make it. Speaking of Shudder, you opened with Shudder talking about The Innocents. I watched one of their most recent things, a Senegalese horror movie called Saloum. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it, which is a very interesting. I mean, I realise I've said interesting so much this episode, but I'm going to stick with it. But it's a very interesting West African mystical western. It's beautifully shot. It uses colour much like Italian horror would.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. And there's sort of varying degrees of African movies. I mean, you've got at one end, I think Senegalese filmmakers tend to be a bit of a cut above generally. And at the other end, you've got Nollywood. And if that name doesn't mean anything, I think it was a meme a while ago, Who Killed Captain Alex was the...
I'm not super familiar with cinema from that part of the world. However, this film has come recommended to me by many people.
Yes, it's very cool. When it's a western and it's sort of tailored around the western stuff, I think it's excellent. When it's not as strong as when it becomes a sort of horror movie in the final third. Mm-hmm. But on the sheer goodwill of that first 2/3, I think it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, I heard the same.
Yeah.
The first 2/3 are really strong, and the last third is kind of dependent on the viewer.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it because you've not watched it. But
no, don't, please.
Yeah, it's not as good, but it's still visually inventive, and it plays with sort of African mysticism, which is not something that you really see a lot of. So
not really.
It's unique enough for me, definitely.
Yeah, it's on my queue up at the top actually. So
yeah,
hopefully I'll be getting to that one much sooner than later.
Okay, so I think that about wraps us up. Clinton, where can we find yourself online?
Mostly I'm on Twitter at Purity Through Fire, and through is spelled THRU.
Yes.
That's really where I do most of my chatting. You can also find me on Letterboxd under the same name.
I'll link it in the description.
Thank you.
And I have been your host, Rob, and you can find me on the internet on Letterboxd too. Just search for my name, Rob Simpson, or on Twitter and Instagram at UncutRobcast, at UncutRobcast, and that was Directors Uncut.